Good afternoon, everyone, and welcome to Insight and Conversation. I am Phoebe Weston-Evans, and I'm a project and research coordinator at ALIA. I'm speaking to you today from Ngunnawal and Ngambri lands, and I acknowledge the traditional owners of this land, and I pay my respects to elders past and present, and extend that respect to any Aboriginal or Torres Strait Islander people present at today's session. Just to start with a little bit of Zoom housekeeping, please keep your microphones muted while we're speaking, and do use the group chat to post questions to the panelists at any stage, and we will try to get to them at the end. We are recording this session and it'll go up onto our YouTube channel. I'll share the link with everyone afterwards, and you're welcome to share it with others who might be interested. So today I am delighted to be joined by two university librarians, Petra Dumbell and Anita Sallenbach from Curtin University in Western Australia. Petra is an academic skills advisor and is responsible for organising and delivering the Graduate Research Advanced Skills Programme. Anita is collection, development and discovery coordinator, working on selection and renewals of information resources and ebook management and acquisition models. Together, they are co-leaders of the one of the library's strategic initiatives for 2022, which is engaging with Indigenous perspectives through the library's services and collections, which is the topic of today's conversation. Before I hand over to Petra and Anita to introduce themselves, I'd just like to acknowledge that we are three library people of European heritage discussing Indigenous matters, so there are clear limitations and constraints there. So I'd like to frame this discussion in the spirit of allyship, and while we're going to talk about what Petra and Anita have been doing, to really acknowledge the work that has been done by Aboriginal and Torres Strait Islander people across Australia in this space. And so here it's really about speaking of personal experience and really not to speak over First Nations voices. And that comes from all three of us. So over to Petra and Anita to introduce yourselves, and then we can get going with some questions I have for you.
Thanks so much, Phoebe. Hello, everyone. It's nice to see some of you. Some of you have the videos on. It's always lovely. We can see a few faces there. So thanks for the introduction. So I'm Petra Dumbell. I am in sort of an Indigenous framework, I guess. I am a new Australian. You might hear from my accent, I'm from Austria. So all my ancestors, all my family are Austrians, apart from one great-great-grandfather who was from Italy. And I came onto Noongar country about 16 years ago, so a while ago now. And I, together with Anita, I would like to acknowledge that the Whadjuk Noongar people, as the custodians of the land on which we talk to you from today, and we want to pay our respects to their elders, past and present. This country was never ceded, and it always was and always will be Aboriginal land.
Thanks, Petra. I'm Anita, and as Phoebe mentioned, I'm also, I have a European background. I came over from Switzerland in 1991, so I have been here on Noongar land since then, which is a really long time. Yes, I've been at Curtin 10 years now. It's been good.
Great. So you and your collaborators at Curtin have been doing really great work on your Reconciliation Action Plan at the university as a whole, and through your engagement with the university library. So can you give us a little bit of background of just how it all got started and when the library got involved in that journey, and how you two came to be part of it?
Yeah, sure. So it all started in 2020, I think towards the end of 2020. After Petra and I attended a cultural awareness program, which was led by the Centre for Aboriginal Studies here at Curtin. It was a really interesting workshop, and afterwards it just left us thinking, well, we've learned a lot, and what can we do specifically in the library with all these things that we've learned? And so I guess the idea for a library project started flowing, and we also had our former university librarian, Catherine Clark. She was really supportive of the idea. And also there was a lot of interest from other library members. And I guess it became clear that it was going to go ahead. And so, so we've been working on this initiative that we called Engaging with Indigenous Perspectives through the library's collections and services ever since.
Okay, great. So in the article that you wrote for INCITE magazine, there is this maxim that you mentioned, which has been guiding your work. So it's nothing about us without us. And so I wanted to ask you how important it's been for you in terms of your working method to be led and to be guided by your Aboriginal and Torres Strait Islander colleagues in the cultural capabilities team, as you say, and from the Centre for Aboriginal Studies.
Yes, I think that's a very important question, and something we should sort of get talking about straight away. Look, the nothing about us without us, or I guess nothing about them without them from our perspective, which is, as we said, sort of European, New Australian perspective. It's everything. It doesn't work at all without it, and nothing we do makes any sense without us talking constantly to quite a lot of our Indigenous colleagues here at Curtin. Somehow, in a way, so it started off with us knowing very little about the space at all. It might have just been from our schooling, from our background, what we were told about the space and about these issues, and then you sort of start educating yourself, and you start identifying a few gaps, a few problems, and you start working on it. But then the whole project and all the ideas we had only started to really make sense when we started talking. So we have a Centre for Aboriginal Studies at Curtin, and I have a few different hats at the library, but one of my hats, so to speak, is I'm the liaison person for the staff working there. So it was very easy for me to start those conversations and basically just say, look, we have these ideas, what do you think of them? And then sort of going in there with quite an open mind, and also being open to the possibility that they say that all sounds just quite awful, which they didn't. But yes, it's completely what we've been doing from the start. And Anita already mentioned Catherine Clark, who was our university librarian at the time when we started the project, and that was always her main aim, basically getting us to do that. At the same time, I think we learned quite quickly early on that in the space there is the fact that those people we have been consulting with and collaborating with and talking to and asking for advice, some of them, it's part of their role to basically help other entities around the university in that space. But for many of them, it isn't. They're obviously in teaching and learning, or they might be in research. And so we quickly realized that we have to be very mindful of the time we're asking of people, and always, I guess, trying as well to see what can we do for them. Is there anything they're struggling with that we can maybe then support them with, because they're supporting us with getting these projects off the ground. So I guess that's the two sides. You do nothing in this space without a lot of consultation, and you use those relationships you have, but at the same time, everything you can, like any work you can do yourself, you should basically just do it and get on with it and not expect anyone else to do the work for you. So yeah, I think that's the most important thing to say in that space.
Yeah, thanks for leading us through the way you've approached that and the things you've learned along the way. I think that'll be that's really useful. And so thinking about some of the things you mentioned in the article, and I know you've been having conversations about ways of emphasizing Indigenous perspectives in your collection via your catalogue. And I'm sure there's lots of cataloguers and metadata specialists here who would be really interested to hear about how that work has evolved.
Yeah, so I guess we always knew we had Australian Indigenous content in our collection, and we also always knew that it's quite difficult to find. And so we thought something that will be really good is to actually try and make this content more easily discoverable, such as via a separate facet in the catalogue, so it can just be filtered. And so that basically when a user runs a search, you can then, via this facet, you can filter down to the content that provides Indigenous perspectives. And so what we've been doing is we've been doing a lot of work on identifying the type of content to be included in this facet, which seems simple enough, but it's actually quite a lot of work. And last year, something we did just to, I guess, speed up the process a bit and get us going with the work on the facet is we held an event that we called a catalogathon, which basically involved volunteers from across the library, participating and going through lists of items and then decide whether they should be included in this facet. Which sounds absolutely horrifying. I think the free lunch helped maybe, but I think in the end it was a really good experience, because I mean, not only did it was actually quite interesting to see, you know, what do we have in our collection, and at the same time the end result was very pleasing, because we ended up with over 4,000 records that we could add, which is a big help to start us off with this facet. So it is in progress, and hopefully it'll become available soon in our catalogue. And the other thing that we've also been looking into is the language facet that our catalogue offers. And there is a feature that allows incorporating Auslan language codes into the filter or the facet. And Auslan is the vocabulary of Aboriginal and Torres Strait Islander languages. And so by incorporating these codes into the language facet, it allows you to really filter down, or, you know, refine your resources, the resources in your results list by a specific language group. So that's quite useful, for example, if you are trying to locate information about maybe about your family or your local area or your country. So I think it's a really good thing. The other thing I wanted to also mention about finding material to include in this facet is that we are very aware that we've got content in our collection that is racist and that is hurtful, sacred and secret. And although we haven't actually come to a final decision or conclusion around how to, I guess, deal with this type of content in regards to include it in the facet, do we attempt to have warnings on this type of content? We've been having a lot of discussions, but yeah, it's not, there's no easy answer, but it's in the making, I suppose. But we do, you know, we're looking forward to these catalogue improvements as they happen, and we hope also that they'll assist with some of the, I suppose, calls for help we've had from around the university around, you know, how do we best find material that provides Indigenous perspectives that we could use for our learning and teaching and research as well.
Yeah, that's really interesting, because on one side, discoverability is really important and that's what you want to provide. But on the other hand, you do want to make your catalogue and your collections a safe place for people to explore. So it's a really interesting bit of work to do, and I imagine you have many thousands of items to comb through to assess. How long did that catalogathon take you and your volunteers?
Well, so the catalogathon, it was a one-day event really, and how many people did we have who participated? About, I forget, 15 or something like that. Yeah. And so it was basically, there was like a morning session, then we all had lunch together, and then there was an afternoon session, and we just worked all that time. And it was actually, I think I was quite surprised at how much work we got done in that day, so it was quite rewarding.
It sounds like you have a really efficient team.
I think there's a thing there that if you provide people food, but also I think it was quite amazing how, because the actual task is I don't know if I should call it boring, but it's very repetitive basically. But there's something that happens, some magic that happens when you have, you know, a group that does the same thing together, and it's sort of, you know, it gets a bit competitive, you know, how many records have I done in the last hour kind of thing. And so that actually worked really well.
Definitely. And were these people who were volunteering library aware? Did they know how to use the catalogue in a more advanced way?
Yeah, they were all library staff from the areas of the library, but we did have it was just kind of we started off with a brief training session, if you like, just to explain to people what to do, but we also had we had like an instruction sheet written up, but at the whole time we also had a team session running. So if anyone had any questions, they could, you know, just ask or put it in the chat, and one of us would answer it. So yeah, it worked really well, didn't it? Yeah.
Right. And are you done with that piece of work? That was all managed. You managed to go through what you needed to get through?
Yeah, we did.
Yeah.
We had, I think, 6 different lists that we created, and so, which doesn't mean we're not finished, which doesn't mean we're finished with, you know, everything, but we will be, hopefully this year, probably creating some new lists and maybe have another catalogathon. Yeah, we'll see how we go. But it was, yeah, because it was so successful, it's definitely something that we're considering having again. Yeah.
Great. Yeah, maybe that will spark some other catalogathons in other collections. In your article, another thing that you mentioned, a part of the range of things that you were starting to set up, you mentioned a book club where you read Pascoe's Dark Emu, and a podcast series that was in its early stages. And so I'm sure people will be interested to know how those 2 initiatives have progressed, if they have at all, and what the learnings and challenges been in those 2 things.
Yeah, sounds good. Look, Phoebe, can I just sort of add something onto to the last question?
Oh yeah, sorry, I didn't mean to cut you off there. Yeah.
Sorry. No, it's just I just wanted to ask 2 things to what we just spoke about before about the facets and the catalogue. One thing was so the catalogathon, obviously we've got about 15 people from across the library, but I think and what that made me think of is, and I think it's very important to say, is that Anita and I are co-leading this initiative, but there's a whole lot of very passionate people at Curtin Library that are working with us on this. So we're just the 2 faces you see, but there's a lot of people who I think had the same sense of, you know, we should do something in the space. We should finally, you know, start those conversations and start that work in a sense. And also about the sort of the hurtful and the racist materials we have. I think what was really nice about it is that we started those conversations. You know, we started to really just say it is there, we know it's there, and we need to do something about it. So while at the moment we don't know yet what that's going to be, it creates really nice discussions, and very big and important ones in terms of, you know, our profession and our values, and, you know, freedom of access to information and the censorship. But then also a sense, you know, you can't hide behind those statements and then just, you know, let things be. You still need to tackle them and I guess discuss them, and still not leave things as they are just because that's how they've always been. So I think that's I think we both found that sort of quite exciting in a way to sort of, you know, start those conversations that are not happening, I think, all over the place, not just at Curtin. And look, the other thing I wanted to quickly talk about, because it comes back to what I said at the beginning about the nothing about them without them kind of Maxine, is what happened when we started working on the facet and on the catalogue. So it was sort of our idea, but it came a bit from the faculties as well, who sort of said, you know, we want to include more Indigenous perspectives in our learning and teaching, but, you know, we can't get to those materials in an easy way. So I guess what I'm saying is the idea was ours, but then also came from the faculties. But then what happened as we started working on it and consulting with Indigenous colleagues all around Curtin was basically that they've now come to us and said things like, we're using reading lists, you know, in our teaching to supply our students with readings. And wouldn't it be lovely if the students who use those reading lists could see the Indigenous authors in those reading lists? So, you know, if they do their assessment, they can actually make sure they include Indigenous voices in whatever they're writing about. And so that's now what we're working on as well. So we're sort of doing the reading list thing. There's going to be a tagging system where you can tag resources as being written by Indigenous or First Nation authors. And so we're just going to feed into the facet. And I guess it's a nice example of how those consultations then work in a way where then, you know, the Indigenous colleagues you have might then come to you and say, we would really like this problem fixed, or, you know, this project to happen, or whatever. So I think that was really lovely for us to see as well, that it came from them, not from us, basically. So yes, sorry, I just wanted to add that.
No, I think that's really important, and highlighting that flexibility of thought and of process, not to necessarily be too attached to the original goal as it was envisioned, but to allow things to take new directions and be susceptible to having feedback and changing it. There's a couple of questions that have come in about this. So Alyssa, hi Alyssa, and thanks a lot for your question. And Alyssa has asked, in this catalogathon, what were you looking for in terms of deciding whether an item should be included in the Indigenous facet, and what content or metadata elements guided your decision?
Yeah,
I'm not sure if that's a Petra or Anita.
Yeah, I'll try. Yeah, so we did spend in the beginning, when we started off, we did spend quite some time trying to figure out just that, what are we actually looking for? And in the end, we thought, well, we don't want to be too prescriptive in a way. We want to include as much as we can. And so we went a bit broad, I suppose, and we were always mostly looking for books. And then we were looking at things that obviously were published by Indigenous authors or were about Indigenous people, and really just anything to do with Indigenous history, culture, language.
Yeah, I think, look, we'd be happy to share those criteria of the list we had. I'm not saying it's perfect. It worked for us.
Yeah, so that was pretty much the extent of it. And so the lists that we used for the catalogathon, they had information about, well, the author, the title, subject headings, publication details, and that was about it. And so based on that, we tried to make an assessment, but there were, of course, cases where you just, often from a title you can't tell, so you had to maybe do a bit of extra work and try to find out, well, is there a table of contents somewhere that I can see, or just to make that sort of decision. And but in the end we felt, well, look, if something slips in there that is not completely about that, well, it's not a big deal, and we will just leave it. But yeah, so I guess the answer is we were quite broad. Yeah.
Okay, Alyssa, I'm not sure if that, I'm sure, I know Alyssa has got a lot of expertise in metadata and cataloging, and I'm sure if, I'm sure you two could continue this conversation outside for more detailed exploration of that side of things. And Keely Chapman has asked whether the Centre for Aboriginal Studies had any feedback regarding that cataloguing facet once it was complete. And I'm not sure it is totally complete yet, but that question going out to you two.
I guess yes, the facet is not live yet. It will be in a couple of months, hopefully. But look, so far we have explained to them in very great detail what it's going to be, and they love the idea. So I think they, but I think for them, they possibly even more excited about the reading list sort of part of the project. But yes, no, they completely on board. They know, and they helped us with the criteria. So they very much know what's coming and have been a part of what we've been doing.
Yeah, great. So I don't know if we could go back to a question about the book club, because it's a really interesting, well, it's a classic initiative to start at a library. But if you had a few minutes to talk about the book club and the challenges and constraints around the podcast, that'd be great.
Yes, thank you. So the book club, and you're right, Phoebe, a book club, I don't need to explain to anyone how that works, which is great because it makes it easy to organize. So we had the first one last year, and we read Dark Emu by Bruce Pascoe. We have at Curtin on the Bentley campus a new yarning circle, so it was at the yarning circle. And look, the feedback we received was great. Everyone loved the event and found it very, very engaging, very useful. And so this year we're going to have one online in a few weeks, just in the lead up to National Reconciliation Week. So one online because we thought it's just more inclusive. Of course, we have staff and students all over the world, really. And then a second one later in the year. And I think the book club event, in terms of the entire project, it was always the easiest to do in a sense, because it's very clear, you know, what it is, what it's going to be. People understand the format. And so, yes, I think in my mind, that's probably something we're just going to do as from now on. It's very much a collaboration with the cultural capabilities team. So that's really not a library event. It's very much a shared event that we run with them. So we do more the admin side of things, I guess, and they then facilitate the book club. And so, yes, that's the book club. The podcast is a bit more challenging, and by that I mean we haven't recorded one yet. So we've done a lot of work sort of on the technical side of things, and, you know, we've tested the equipment, so we're basically ready to go. We've had a lot of interest in the idea all across campus, really, from Indigenous colleagues. But I think what it comes down to is it's a time commitment, which is not a small thing. And like we said at the beginning, it's always something people need to fit within the current workload, which obviously can be very challenging. And also, I guess we're asking those people to obviously share, you know, as much of themselves as they're comfortable with, and their stories and their viewpoints. And while they, some of them have approached us, or some of them are very enthusiastic about the idea, I think it's still not a small thing to do. And so, sorry, so far it just hasn't happened yet. We still have a few people sort of lined up. There's some really awesome research done at Curtin in the Indigenous space around country and what's the best way to describe it?
Yeah, it's really about
sorry, I just threw you.
Yeah, no, it's really about the restoration of country by Indigenous people. So basically there's research that's happening in that space, and those researchers are then eventually very keen to use our podcast series to promote their research, basically. But that as well hasn't happened just yet. So I guess the podcast series, we're still very much hoping is going to happen. It's intended for Curtin staff and students only, because the idea was always that we just need to talk to each other within Curtin about all these matters. So yes, I guess that's it.
Thank you. Yeah, I guess there's often a balance to be struck between the enthusiasm for an idea and then the practicalities on the ground of technical side and the time and all of the input that's needed. And yeah, it's a lot of effort that goes into podcasts. I know we spoke about some of the constraints around having a digital book club and making sure, finding a book that everyone can access either through your catalogue or through their local library catalogue. And I just thought that was, when you mentioned when we were speaking before this session, that there's a really good bit of practical advice that you had about simply being able to access and download or use as an ebook or audiobook. And so, yeah, I don't know if you have any more thoughts to add about that practical side of the book club.
Yeah, I think we were a bit surprised that we came across this hurdle, because we thought, oh yeah, there's all these great books, let's pick that one. And then we realized, oh, we don't have that one electronically, and we don't have the right license for it. And let's try that one. And we went through quite a few that we just in the end couldn't choose, because we think, well, if we are running a book club, and we really need to be able to provide access to the book. And and there were interesting issues around some of the books not being available, being available electronically, but maybe not in English, but in German, and not having the country rights in Australia to actually have it. It's just things that we didn't expect that we would have to deal with. But yeah, I mean, luckily there are books that we can use available, but I think we just have to kind of slightly change the approach, where maybe look at what do we have available and then select a book from there rather than the other way around.
I'm really sad to say that our half hour is up. I feel like we could keep talking about this for a really long time. It's been really terrific to talk with you both, Anita and Petra, about this experience and what you've learned and what you've endeavoured to navigate in this space. And I think this conversation has raised a lot of questions, and I think it would have been thought-provoking and question-provoking for everyone listening. And so if anyone would like to continue this conversation and to share thoughts and ideas in this space, please just write to me or Petra or Anita with your details, and we'll find a way to keep the conversation going. So thank you once again for talking with me, Petra and Anita, and thanks to Jackie Lucas, who's been on tech. We will be back for another Insight and Conversation in June or July 2022, coinciding with the next edition of Insight magazine, which is on the theme of specializations. If you'd like to write for Insight, submissions for the following issue, which is on the theme of thinking global, are open until May 17th. So you can email insight@alia.org.au for more information about that. Until the next time, thanks very much for joining us, and enjoy the rest of your day.
Thanks, Phoebe.
Thank you.